everyone, and welcome to the Evolve with Emily Show YouTube channel. The best way to support the show on this YouTube channel is to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and or share it with a friend. I hope that you guys enjoy this episode, and whichever way you choose to support the show, I just wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much. I hope that today's message and episode brings some bit of positive change to your life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Evolve with Emily Show. I am your host, Emily Hayden, and today we have a special guest joining us all the way from LA. He's actually in studio, so if you guys are listening on an audio platform, you should head on over to YouTube and check us out on YouTube for the video. Today we have Love Island contestant from Love Island, USA. We have Alpha Elite. He's with Gym Sups. He's the owner of Connor Trott Finance as well as Connor Trott Fitness. You might have guessed it. We have Connor Trott on today's show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, of course. So one thing that I have to say is we connected in Alpha Land while you were here shooting for Alpha Elite. And it was really cool because one thing that I noticed right away was that you had such a humble spirit about you. You were not shy in coming up and saying like, hey, like I listened to the show and I really dig your message and I dig what you're about, you know? And I thought that was really respectful and it was really respectable because I feel like in today's age, we have a lot of people that have a lot of pride that may not be able to say, hey, I actually support and follow you and I'm about this too. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say thank you for that. I thought that was really dope. And yeah, when did you find the show? I'm kind of curious.
So I want to say that I found... Well, I had known of you and I'd been following you because I had been obviously supporting Alpha Elite and watching YouTube and fitness kind of growing up. So I had known of you, and then I didn't know you had your this podcast actually until I think for some reason I was on Instagram and I was on your page for some reason, and then I saw you started. Well, it's funny because I think with your page you started to post your little clips of your podcast on your page, and I saw you doing that. And then it was also around the time, I want to say a few months ago, I also was actually doing a very similar thing on my page. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, like this is something that I'm doing right now, and I've known of you before, and now I'm like, oh, you're doing the same thing. I'm like, oh, I love this. That's how I kind of found it. And then I saw you had your podcast page, and I'm like, oh, that's where I like started listening to it and just really connected with all the messages that you have been putting out.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate the support and I'm so glad we were able to connect because we connected and I got to do a little research, do a little read up on you for today's show. And I'm really excited to get more into you. I feel like sometimes you can judge a book by its cover. I feel like a lot of people, we naturally tend to do that unless we intentionally look for the deeper, right? We intentionally look for what is it that I'm not seeing? And I think if people go to your page and they just do a quick scroll, they're like, okay, beautiful man that lives in LA. He's like a model. He was on Love Island. You know, they may judge the book by its cover, not realize that there's actually a lot of depth to you. There's actually, you know, a lot of these, you know, thoughts and messages that you have been bravely sharing across your platforms now for a little while in the form of Instagram messages, YouTube videos, podcasting. I'm seeing that you're distributing it on all platforms, which is really smart. So can you tell me a little bit about what these messages are for people that may never have seen one of these messages? And then also what inspired you to start putting out these messages?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of going back to, a few months ago, whenever I actually moved almost immediately prior to when I moved to LA, that whole situation of me moving kind of was, it wasn't in my 5-year plan. It wasn't this game plan like, oh, when I'm 24 years old, I'm going to move to LA or I'm going to move somewhere. It was kind of spur of the moment. And the reason why I bring that up is because I'm from Pittsburgh. I've lived there my whole life. And I started working my full-time job as a CPA I guess it was December of 2020, and was working fully remotely. So I was traveling a little bit, and I was traveling. I was staying in LA, living with some friends, and I was actually on my flight home, back to Pittsburgh after I had made the decision that I was going to move to LA. And it was kind of this like weird, I want to use the term like awakening, but it was this weird feeling that I had like inside me, like of going almost like a growth or something that I found within me or something on my flight back from LA to Pittsburgh, because I knew there was something that was changing at this point in my life, that I knew what was ahead of me. There's a lot of unknown, but I knew that it was at the right time and for the right reasons. And on that flight home from LA to Pittsburgh, typically I just would listen to music and sleep or something. But I remember, I believe it was a red eye home to Pittsburgh or something like that. And I was weirdly awake for the entire plane ride. And I remember bringing out my notes app on my phone and writing these, I called them 20 rules to life. And they were basically these reminders, is what I call them, for whenever, really for myself, but ultimately the intention was to help other people. But I think in the grand scheme of things, what they really do is remind me, which is interesting. And that's, at that point, I kind of wrote these just off of my head, maybe an hour just writing on my phone. I was just like, if someone were to see me, they would probably be like, what is this kid doing, or reading what I was writing?
Yeah.
But I was just so like, I knew this was going to help, like whether or not it helped other people, it was going to help me. And that's what I kind of was the impetus, I guess, of a lot of these messages that I currently have on my page.
That's so incredible. What you're talking about, I have definitely experienced, and I feel like it's these moments of clarity and direction, and it's kind of like this moment that shows you the next direction, right? The next path. And that moment, like you're saying, of how like you knew things were going to change and you didn't really know exactly what was going to happen. I refer to that as the moment of knowing that like you have the opportunity right now to evolve. You have the opportunity to leave behind everything that you know and everything that is comfortable, everything that is safe, and to go into the unknown for this hope, this longing that there's more. And I think everybody feels that tug on their heart at a certain point. And so it's really cool that you felt that. And then through that, you were actually able to share like those messages that were on your heart. And like you said, it usually does start with an individual journey of us first. And then we get to distribute that and share that with others, which I think is just so beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's, I think the beginning stages of a lot of it is this self-awareness of what's going on, I guess, inside of you. And you realize this, and then you're able to kind of put this into physical form, whatever that may be. For me in that situation, and, a lot of these messages that you're sharing, like that's the tangible form, that's the physical form of whatever this evolving within you is like manifesting into, right? So that's like putting that into physical form, like linking the two and connecting the two is, I do feel like everyone has that obviously like within them. And like you said, I do think that you are able to, maybe it's this journey, right? Everyone has this journey, and there's certain moments along this journey that point you towards evolving, right? Or maybe it's easier to become more aware of what's going on. Everyone has different life situations and circumstances that lead to that certain point. But then ultimately being able to become self-aware of that, I think people have that choice to, I think you become more aware that it is a choice. It's a choice, but it's almost like certain situations point you in that direction. And I think that's almost like the reason, or it's always been coming to that point, but you didn't know that until it's almost most aware to you.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like it's almost like the universe, the world, God, whatever it is, has been setting you up for this all along, and then finally it manifests in that moment. For those watching on YouTube, we just had to take a little break because Frankie, my little baby puppy, just decided to stand and bark at the door, which I know the audio is picking up. So he's going to join us for the rest of the show. So we were talking about these moments where what has been working inside of you all along starts to manifest and starts to come out. So I first actually want to go back to, why did you decide to make the move across the country to Los Angeles? What brought you to LA?
Yeah, so I would say, I think there's a lot of different factors, but for me, it was this longing to to experience something new and to put myself in a position where I had no choice but to figure out everything on my own. And I felt like at this point in my life where I was, how old I was, I felt like I was, for me personally, ready to make that jump or make that decision. In LA specifically, I think given the circumstances of what was going on in my life, I was just traveling a little bit, working full-time remotely. It just made the most sense to me. I knew I had some friends that lived out there. I knew some people. And it was just the easiest. It was, when I kind of broke it down, I'm a big believer in like not really like trying to simplify a lot of decisions in your life, like whether they're really big decisions or whether they're really small decisions. I'm a firm believer in making it as simple, like simplifying it as much as possible, and literally just going with the one that maybe is like the easiest decision, but also just kind of feels just a little bit more right. And for me, combining those two, it just kind of made the most sense. And it was kind of at a point where I'm like, okay, I do want to live somewhere else. I want to experience this. I'm sorry, I totally forgot this, but I had actually gotten a new job in LA. And that was the main reason.
Hello.
I'm like, because now I don't do that. I'm no longer doing that job. I was actually in the process of applying to other jobs in that kind of CPA, finance, accounting realm. And I had actually the one day that I got an email back saying that I didn't get this job that I had been applying to. I walked into a gym out there, and they basically offered me a job as like a director of personal training there. I'm like, oh, totally career change, totally different city. Like, I think I'm just ready to do this. Let me just take it. So I took it, super spontaneous, right? And then came back to Pittsburgh, and then kind of fast forward, I basically worked that job for about a month or 2 months, and then now full-time, just do full-time online coaching.
That's amazing. So, okay, you made this massive leap, went to LA. When did Love Island come into play?
Yeah, so Love Island was it was the summer of 2020.
Summer of 2020. Okay, so that was when, like a year before you moved to LA?
Yeah, so almost immediately, about a year. Yeah.
Okay. And so when I shared you on my Instagram and I was like, oh, hey, like Connor, met him at the gym, I had a lot of people reach out, and I was like, oh, like people know, a lot of people knew who you were. They were like, this guy is just the sweetest. I watched his season of Love Island. I didn't get to watch your season of Love Island, but now I'm kind of curious.
You don't have to watch it if you
don't.
want.
You're like, no, it's good. Okay. Well, so people were curious. How did you even get that opportunity in the first place? How does that work? How does one become a contestant on Love Island? Is that what you're referred to as? I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah, you can call it that. Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, I never had any kind of social media in high school. Well, I think I had a Facebook, but I never had like Instagram or anything really else. And then I got into college. I made my Instagram for the first time. It was just a personal page with my family and friends. And then that's when I really got into fitness and working out. And I was like, because I did that in high school with sports, but I was never really athletically good enough to really do that in college or anything like that. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to focus on my studies and do the whole staying in shape, health and wellness, fitness stuff on the side. So I got into college. I made my personal Instagram, didn't really post a whole lot. But then I watched a lot of YouTube and like followed a lot of fitness influencers on Instagram. So I was like, oh, like I kind of want to create and document like this. Because it is like I was also kind of really into kind of art also, like in like growing up. And that's almost like a form of it. Like,
for sure.
Right, creating. I mean, all of this is.
Yeah.
And so that's where I found, like, I just loved it. So I actually made a separate fitness Instagram, and long way of saying, basically I would post every single day on that, different tips and advice and workouts and everything, and grew that page, pretty decently over about a couple of years or so. And I graduated with my master's in May of 2020. And basically they were, I guess, casting for the show, and they reached out to me through that fitness.
No way.
Page. Yeah.
Wow. So your Instagram provided for that opportunity.
Yeah.
That's incredible. It's really crazy to see like what's possible now just by having an Instagram or social media account. I feel like we live in a day and age where we have more opportunity than any other generation.
100%.
It's insane. So, okay. So talk to me about the experience a little bit of having your life filmed, right? Because it's essentially like reality TV, right? How real is it?
I mean, I think it's very real.
Okay.
And so I guess what I will say prior to all of this is, I guess our generation, whatever that means, but like, that are used to creating and filming and taking pictures of us and kind of knowing what we look like, right? I think it's interesting. Like when you see yourself in a picture, like, you see yourself in pictures, or you see yourself after you record something on a story or something like that. You're used to this. Like, that's kind of like what we do. We have this like separate world almost of like, hopefully you're this person, in this world, and then you're the exact same person.
Right.
I mean, there's obviously some differences, right? But like, we're used to all of this. So like it wasn't too odd or weird for me to really be like, oh, you're just going to be on camera 24/7.
Right.
But then again, like, obviously, like, everyone that was there was just because that, like, we've been used to all this. I do think that, they kind of, it didn't really feel any different because they maybe we're used to this. Maybe I'm just like,
no, that's a really good. That's a really good point. I think you have a good point there that we have, I don't know how young they're starting social media now, but from a young age, selfies and videoing yourself is pretty normal. So I could see why it would be more comfortable actually to be in that kind of situation versus previous generations when they didn't practice those things that we essentially like practice every day, right?
Yeah.
So,
sorry to interrupt you. I think what's actually interesting is I'll see, I don't know, certain my family members or something like that, that are, in generations like above us, like my parents or grandparents. I think it's interesting to see them, how they act on like whenever they are like recording something, a video or something, because it's almost like they take on a new persona, like it's not them.
Yeah.
But I comparing that to us, or even people like younger than us, it's very fluid. It's very similar. Like, it's not like we're trying to, I do think there's maybe a little bit like you kind of put on a little bit, but really when I think about it, it's like, that's almost like if you're by yourself doing this, that's almost like who you actually are as a person, rather than if you're actually in person with someone or a group of people. I honestly think that's almost like when you kind of put this front on to kind of like maybe impress them or impress yourself, or be someone you're not, maybe, with maybe some of these exterior things. Whereas like if you're just by yourself doing a story, I almost think like that's actually who you are.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that comes from a very authentic place in you. And I think there's both. I think there's people like you that is who they are. They're really showing that. And then I think that there's the other flip side of the coin where people have like a persona that they want people to perceive them as. So I think it's both. But I love where this conversation is going. Why do you think that it is important to be authentic and to truly be who you actually are and allow that to be shown? Because the truth is that it takes a lot of courage to really show like who you actually are. It takes vulnerability. So how do you do that on your platforms, and how do you not worry about the judgment of others? And, because you're a strong male presence, right? And you're getting on there doing this, like, essentially like what I see it as is like positive motivational type of, talks, which I think is really dope. And I think there's not enough people doing it. So I respect it a lot. But do you ever battle with thoughts of like, okay, how am I going to be perceived, or what are other guys going to think? Or, do you ever battle any of those things?
I definitely think I absolutely used to. And I mean, I will say that I know it's there, like it's in the back of my head, like, but it's very insignificant. Like, it's not something that I really think about at all, really. And I think your question was, why is it important to be authentic, right?
Yeah.
So for me, what what I've really realized through social media and having this audience, right, of people, is that I think it's interesting when you brought up the point that I think there's two types of people, like, or there's two versions of people maybe, that, and I think it's kind of like a spectrum. Like, I think people can kind of be both in different percentages of them.
That's a good way to describe it.
And, but there's more people that are like, oh, maybe I'm 90% of what people want to be and 10% of who I actually am. Or it's like maybe flipped, right? And I would argue that it's better to, I mean, there's no right reason or right thing, but I think it's obviously better to be as close to 100% of authentically who you are, versus what people want you to be. And I think it's important to be authentic and who you actually are, because I think what I was kind of getting to a little bit earlier was, what I've realized that social media, what its purpose serves, at least me, is being able to connect with people and relate to someone. And that's what I think became aware of when I was actually following a lot of these fitness influencers or people when I was watching YouTube and Instagram in high school and college and everything, was that the reason that I really enjoyed it wasn't just because of, they were helping me live a healthier life. They were helping me find a lot of these skill sets that I, can apply to my life that make my life better because of that. But I think a greater purpose was that I was able to relate to them on certain thoughts or mindsets that I may have had that were different than what the majority of other people I think that I was around or was exposed to had. And I thought that I was almost
weird or different. Yes.
And I was like, oh, like, I'm actually not.
Yeah. Oh, cool. So it kind of allowed you to see parts of yourself in somebody else and make you not feel alone.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think that's, the power of us, like you said, sharing like the most authentic version of ourselves, because there's always somebody that is going to impact. I've heard you speak before on being authentic and how you shouldn't create your content just based on engagement, just based on the numbers and the feedback and the insights of like, okay, this is what the majority wants to see, right? Because, why do you say that? Like, what's your reasoning behind being authentic and not just doing it for the numbers?
Yeah. So I do think that, excuse me, can play an important part on knowing what type of value that people want, right? I think if you are putting out the type of content that provides the type of value that aligns with who you are and what you want to, the type of content that you want to create and put out, I think it serves a very great purpose as far as engagement or how well things do. But I honestly think part of it stems from me being overly into that, like obsessive of that.
I see.
And kind of catering to it, and then realizing that I think I was moving away from what I really wanted to, the type of value and the type of person that I wanted people to know me by. Because I used to be before Love Island, my page, it was a fitness page, and I used to post, there was always like this type of, like mindset, motivation kind of part of it. But my content was kind of catered to, like maybe like shirtless pictures or like, posing videos or something like that. It's like what does well and people like to see, and you get these comments. So I did that for a little bit, and then I realized like sure, like that's nice and all that, but it's not really the type of like person that I really want to be known as.
I see.
I want to be known for more than just that.
So how did you make a shift in your content once you had that realization? Like, what did you decide to do differently, or what did you decide to add?
Yeah, I think it was kind of happening, moving away from that kind of being casted for the show and then coming off of the show.
Because you can't use social media during, right?
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You actually, they take all of your electronics from you.
So wait, how is it not having social media, and how long did you not have a phone or social media for?
Yeah, so I was, depending on how long you were actually on the show for.
Gotcha.
You got it back after you left the show. So for me, I went without it for, I want to say 6 weeks.
Okay. How was it not having a phone for 6 weeks?
It was one of the most, I don't know how to describe it. It was because it wasn't my choice to be like, oh, I'm not doing this. Right. It was like forced upon me.
I see. Yeah, I could see how that could change the experience.
It's like funny you say that because I didn't really think about it, but it was almost like to me, it's like this growing realization that, there's this this physical world, that we're here right now. And then there's this almost like your phone is like another world almost. Right.
Totally.
So it's like not having that and literally being all of my energy and focus and everything, conversations, was literally had to be, there was no choice, but you had to focus that in on almost the present moment and like what you were doing throughout your days. And another interesting thing was that, you never knew like what time it was of the day. So you really had
no way.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had a phone, but it was the wrong time. So, and so you really had no like external factors that you could really like think about really. Like you didn't have your phone. You couldn't watch TV, listen to music, like any of this stuff. It was just like, okay, let's talk about love and feelings and how you're doing. And it's almost like a weird therapy, but it's being filmed. So it's like not really, it's weird.
Yeah. Wow. So interesting. And I think one thing that I've definitely realized in my life too is, I personally started my Instagram account, and from there it's evolved into multiple platforms, and you get really focused on building this brand and building this business and helping to share your life on Instagram and on all these platforms. Right. And I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm actually lacking community in person. And it's because I spend so much time and so much effort creating these connections and community online, which is great. And there is a lot of positive to it. But the negative can be that you can build this whole thing online and then like you're in person and you have, no one to hang out with, or it's a Friday night and you're like, man, I'd love to have a game night with my friends that live all over the world. And it's cool that they live all over the world, but like they can't come over on a Friday night, And so what I've really realized in my life is that it's important to create that in-person community as you're building the online. So it's actually a goal of mine in 2022. And I wouldn't say a goal, it's just a priority of mine to build more in-person community, in-person connection with people that are in my community as far as like where I live. Right.
Gotcha, 100%.
Because I have the online community down. I think it's awesome and I love it. I'm so thankful for it. But I realized that like we as human beings, we really are meant to be with each other. We're meant to grow. We're meant to, have open conversation and share our thoughts and ideas and creativity. Because what flourishes out of that is the most beautiful thing, right? Because like I'm sure, and you can tell me, because you work online, right? And you work from anywhere. Sometimes you can get really stuck just being alone on your computer, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say just a couple of things off of what you just said. So I do think it's a balance, right? It's this, you can't be, you can, but I think different people deal with it in different ways, just of inherently who you are as a person. So like being 100% isolated, like doing this online, like, oh, I have this, whatever it may be, like different feelings of community or of engagement with people that are online in this other world. It's great, but then there is, especially since moving and like I live alone and I'm like realizing this, like it's nice to have this right community like in this world that you built from scratch or whatever happened to get there. But then there's also this balance of like putting your phone down and then actually physically having a conversation with someone, like whether it is over FaceTime or over the phone or right, like that's still I still kind of feel a very similar way. Maybe not exactly, but there is this balance of physically like talking with someone. Like there's this, I don't know what it is like about it that is very different that you can only get from having a conversation with someone, whether that's like body language or just eye contact or whatever, that you can only receive from like another human being physically in person with you.
Yes.
So it is a balance. It absolutely is a balance. And one other thing that I was actually going to ask you was, like, do you have any intentions or like cues, I guess is what I would call them, to like remind you or help you build that in-person community more kind of going forward?
Yeah, to kind of keep it like at the forefront of my mind. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have this like calendar, and I'm actually creating calendars because I love them so much.
Yeah.
But I have this monthly calendar, right? And it's on my fridge. I'll show you downstairs.
I saw it actually.
Oh, you saw it? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, in there I get to put, on that one, it is for my personal goals and my focus of the month. And I have like a little note section. In that note section, I put like, what is my priority for that month, right? So I can say, okay, my priority is, training X amount of times, my hobby X amount of times, which currently is like jujitsu, in-person community. And because in-person community is on there, all of my actions and planning and things for the month of January needs to be focused on supporting that priority. Right. So, and what's cool is I see it every single day. So every single day I'm looking and I'm like, okay, how am I focusing on, hitting my business goals, hitting my personal goals, but also prioritizing what's most important to me just for the month of January. And I think where people get tripped up on creating these goals and setting priorities is they say it's for like the whole year. And that's so long and so generic that it's really difficult to follow through. But what I can do is say, okay, my goals community, which means during the first week of January, I have like a whole list of like, podcast interviews that I'm doing and business things and personal things, but where's my in-person community? So I'll text a friend and say, hey, do you want to go walk at the park on Wednesday the 10th?
Gotcha.
I'm not joking. And I'll like schedule that, right? Or so I'm intentional about like, let me reach out and let me make sure that I'm building community in some way. So for me, I have to like see things and I have to see them on a daily basis, or I will fall into like unconscious patterns. So for me, it's really important, whether it's a monthly goal, it's a daily goal, or it's just habits that I want to cultivate in my life. I have to like write them out and see them so that when I'm tired at the end of a long day and I just want to scroll, which I don't get value out of, I don't enjoy, it doesn't make me feel better, I'll look at that list and say, this is my intention. I want to do these things, and I think sometimes we can find ourselves like trapped in this like scrolling mode, right? And it's like, we don't even really want to do it. We don't even really get a lot of benefit out of it, but it's this unconscious pattern that I personally try really hard to break,
Isn't it funny how like why is that so hard? Like why, or like you said, it is, I use that word a lot, unconscious, like when you do things that don't have meaning or intention behind them. And oftentimes I think we kind of revert to just doing things that naturally relieve us of like stress, right? Or something. And I think that is a stress relief for many people, myself included, but it's not, I know there's, like you said, there's so many better ways to like, if that's what I'm calling it, stress relief, to do that. Right. Or be intentional with your time as far as, doing what your priorities are for the month, like you said. But yeah, going back to my question, like, why do you think, like, because this is just something I have off the top of my head right now, is like, why do you think we do that?
It's very difficult to actually intentionally live your life because for whatever reason, the way that we're wired, our brain wants to keep us comfortable and safe, and we are wired to survive. And we're not really wired as humans to be the most intentional, be the most excellent. It actually takes the most extreme amount of intentionality and dedication and purpose and drive and reminding yourself. It takes a lot to actually live an intentional life, to actually live an excellent life. Our unconscious pattern, for whatever reason, is to stay exactly where we're at.
Isn't that?
It's crazy.
I agree. Yeah, exactly what you said. Yeah, it takes an incredible amount of, because we only have so much energy, right, in a day, right? And think of it as almost like your battery on your phone, right? You get to the end of the day, and I think in a weird sense, like I know for me personally, if I honestly actually know what time of the day it is, I will feel a certain type of way, So regardless of what I did in the day, honestly, I think that's what I'm becoming more aware of and conscious of.
Interesting. This is making me think so much.
Like,
Keep
so
going.
like if I actually, and this is, I'm bringing this up because I think it's another kind of unconscious thing that I personally do. So if I see it's, and kind of sometimes judge myself on like how much I've actually done in the day,
Yeah.
which can be a good thing. But I think it's, and from a bird's eye view, if I were to zoom out and think about it, and this idea of actually knowing what time it is, and if it's, let's say, and I'm getting better at this, like you said, as far as being intentional with your time. But yeah, if it's, and I think that's like scheduling is obviously important to know what time it is and to do things at certain times, right? And that's what I'm trying to be better at too.
Right, time management.
Yeah. But I do think it's, I think it kind of goes back to if you have items or actions that you want to do in the day and you have done all of them, then, you know, it doesn't really matter like how you spend the rest of your day. But I think it does go back to kind of beginning your day and knowing what you have to do for the day. And then kind of realizing maybe if I haven't actually done all of them, like sometimes if it's late at night, I'm just saying, oh, then I can just kind of pick it back up in the morning or something like that. But if it's like late at night, like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock like that, I think my body almost like physically is like, oh, it's not time to work. It's time to shut down, regardless of maybe I even didn't do anything throughout the entire day. It's like, well, now it's time to kind of to sleep and rest. And like, it's important to listen to your body. Right. But I do think it's, like you said, it takes energy to actually go against that almost.
Yeah. Like go against the natural patterns of what your body wants to do. And I think I hear what you're saying here, how it's kind of like this mental, you know, if you see that it's 2 p.m. and you're like, oh my God, what did I do today? Did I accomplish what I was supposed to do? And you feel this like internal pressure because it's 2 p.m. But like, if we really want to go into it, time is just a construct that we all made up. You know what I mean? Yes. And so I think it's interesting because I believe just from what I'm hearing, I kind of feel like your Love Island experience of not really knowing what time it was and not having your phone actually brings us to your awareness, because it's a very interesting thing to look at time and realize that it places these, you know, pressures on you, or it places importance on certain things or not. And like you said, there's a balance. We need it. We have to have time management. That's how you get things done, right? But I think, you know, what I'm trying to do in my life is break free from my unconscious programming, right? And I think that could be a part of it. And like you said, it's not like I can't not have a watch or know what time it is, you know, but it is recognizing that and recognizing the next time I pick up my phone, it's 2 p.m. and I'm judging myself because I didn't get X, Y, Z done, to actually just be like, actually right now is a perfect opportunity to do X, Y, and Z.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about like being efficient maybe. But it's funny you mentioned that, because I really didn't even recognize or realize that whole experience of literally not having my phone or not knowing what time it was is actually a big reason why I'm kind of aware of that right now. Like that's like this epiphany, literally just like when we were talking right now, like I realized that I'm like, that's actually probably why I feel this way.
Yeah. And it's cool because I really feel like our life experiences, we all have a different life. We all have different things, right? So you being able to come on the show and speak about even just that one topic, it's like life, God, whatever you believe in, knew that you needed that experience in order to have this perspective and this way of living, you know? And I think what you've done is you found a certain way of living that you enjoy, you thrive off of, and you want to share with others. It's clear by your YouTube content, your Instagram stories. I love your intro, by the way. It's so sweet. If you guys haven't listened to one, you definitely need to go listen to one. But it's evident that it's had such an impact in your life because, like, you know, circling back to the very beginning of the episode, we go through things first. And then when we go through them, we realize the impact and the value of them. That gives us the desire, the purpose to follow through and share that with other people. So Love Island, after Love Island, when did you open your online training business? Because you are a certified trainer and nutritionist. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So basically I started my job as a CPA in December of 2020. So I finished the show completed about like beginning of October, and then I had a few months before I started my job. And it was pretty intense. That we have as in accounting, there's certain. So I worked for a CPA firm, and I worked in the audit side of it. So I was doing like public audits. Probably means nothing, but like it's pretty intense. The first few months of the year, it's called busy season.
Yeah.
So that was a huge reality check for me, and
How so?
I think it was really I think it was for all of us who were starting our careers. We had like a cohort, like a class of us that were starting at this firm. And it was just starting this career that I had a feeling I didn't know if it was going to be for me or not, but my intention was to get my CPA license, and I had to work for a year. And that was my intention before doing this show. I had passed these exams. I got my education, and the last piece of it, I just needed to work for a year. And regardless of what happened, I wanted to follow through with that intention. And I worked for that busy season time period, and then got my license in about summer of 2021, and actually went on a vacation with a family vacation. We always go to the Outer Banks, North Carolina with my family.
Oh, cool.
Literally been doing that for like since I was a baby, every single year.
That's awesome.
And my family, we go down for 2 weeks, and I went for the entire 2 weeks. I took total 2 weeks off from work, total PTO, didn't look at my laptop at all. And that trip really was kind of the start of a lot of changes that really brought me to where I am today. It was me realizing I didn't like what I was really doing.
Wow.
I think I obviously kind of knew this, but it was like, let me do something about it now. And I was like, I'm going to study and get my personal training certification, my certified nutrition coach cert. So on vacation, I studied for those and passed those exams.
On vacation? That's awesome.
And I passed the nutrition coach one, and then my personal trainer one I did when I got home. And then, not that I really needed that, but I was like, I want to get these to make me, to kind of,
like heighten your value, so to speak. Yeah.
Like, okay, like this person knows what he is talking about. He has these. So I got those, and then because I had always actually wanted to do like coaching, and because I had helped, family members, friends, like all throughout college. Whenever I kind of, I competed once when I was 19, 20.
Oh, that's right. I think I saw you had YouTube videos, right? You vlogged a little bit.
I like tried old. So I did it, and because I saw, all these people like on YouTube doing it, I'm like, I really want to do this. They like going back to like being relatable and inspiring you and motivating you to do things. And so competing was something that I was like, oh, I want to do. And I did that when I was in college, and then it's like, I want to start my coaching business. And it had these goals of mine that I didn't really act upon until I got back from like this family vacation that I went on.
So quick question. Let me stop you there.
Of course.
Why do you feel like you were all of a sudden inspired enough to take action? Because a lot of people have these thoughts, like you said, you may have even known like, this is not really for me. But what about that 2-week family vacation inspired action?
Yeah, I think I was just so present like with my family that and just like loving life, like, and like when I was like with them, that maybe just, I'm not exactly sure. Like it was just something about.
Do you feel like maybe it was the contrast between like being present and loving your life and loving your family, and then realizing maybe you don't have that feeling at work? Yeah,
no, I think it absolutely is.
Okay.
And this is my personal experience. Like this is what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
And then I was like, there's this, it's almost like these Sunday scaries for, people that are in school or like, or in a career, right. That they're not entirely enjoying. So it's like, you have this time frame where you're like, oh, I'm going on vacation, but then I have to kind of go back to my day job or whatever I'm doing. And then I kind of was, I was aware enough to say, it's risky, right? It's like, I want to change this because it's the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of going from what my occupation was as an accountant, which is
Mm-hmm.
the most probably risk averse job you could probably have. Like your literal job, my job was to literally like avoid that at all costs. And like
Oh,
to
wow.
or like make sure companies were like avoiding that at all costs.
I see.
And like is like a consultant role almost. And to then kind of make this decision to be like, okay, I'm going to make a risky decision.
Like
It's
do
a
the
very-
opposite of what I do every day.
Exactly. So it's very contrast, very different.
Okay.
But it was, I think it was just because it was this contrast of, what I like was personally experiencing. And I was like, I want to change this.
And I think something else that you did, which is really difficult for a lot of people to do, is just to take time and space. And I found in my own life, taking time and space brings clarity. You really can't have clarity when you're still stuck in the hustle and bustle of like 24/7 work, right? For you to like allow yourself time and space to disconnect, to be with family. And it's not like you went to this brainstorming session with some coach, like, okay, let's figure out your life. No, like people think that's always what it has to be. Sometimes it's just getting present and having the sun on you, right? Experiencing sunshine, experiencing family, good conversation, and you can actually have clarity through that. For myself, at the end of this last year, I took some space intentionally because I was like, I could easily just go right through the year, just working 24/7, right? I know myself, but I really wanted more clarity in my life and my vision and my purpose. And it's crazy because taking the little amount of time off that I took gave me a fresh wind. It gave me new purpose, new direction. So I just hope that everyone that's listening can identify, if you haven't had time and space inside of your life, inside of your career, whatever it is, you have no idea how much like life is in that space. Don't be afraid to take that time off.
So that's a good point. Yeah, I was going to ask Emily actually.
Yeah.
So I guess 2 questions. The first one would be, did you take that time off? Like, did you go somewhere? Did you do this like here? Like,
I actually did it here.
Okay.
And I knew that for myself, like faith is a large part of my life. And I knew that I wanted to connect with God. I was in a season of my life where I felt a little unclear. I felt like I couldn't really see things. And normally things are very clear for me. So I was experiencing transition in my life of certain things, getting out of a toxic relationship. And I really needed to just be alone and be with God. That was my main priority. And it wasn't any one particular day. It was just my intentionality with that time. I was doing all the things that are good for me, right? Like walking in the sunshine with my dogs and having my meditation, doing yoga, having prayer time, having an incredible daily routine, staying away from the things that I know are not good for me, like overuse of social media or scrolling or anything that is just numbing or intentional. I did no alcohol because during that time, alcohol is not a big part of my life anyways. But during that time, I was just like, right now, I don't want a single, not even one drink, not because of any other reason other than I need clarity. And that's the number one thing that's going to distort your clarity, to be honest. So whenever I have an intention, like clarity, I just get really severe and ferocious with my approach with it. And I say that, but like I say severe and, and ferocious, but like I'm meditating, right? But I mean, like I severe in the sense where I'm like, no alcohol, right? Like not even a drink. And it's not that one drink would do anything. It's just, I want all that there is. Like I want to squeeze every ounce that is inside of that time period for me. And now like this morning, so today at the earlier of the show, you were talking about being on the plane, right? And writing all this stuff down. People thought you were crazy. This morning I had full intention of sleeping in, because, I've like injured my back and I needed some rest. And yet my body wakes me up at 6:30. And based on whatever dream I was having, which normally I remember, this time I didn't, I just like immediately needed to write things down for my business and my brand. And I could not type fast enough. And I had like all the collections inside of my head and all the meanings behind it. And it was just all there, So it's cool because I went from a place pretty quickly from not feeling clear, not feeling connected, not feeling all these things to now I feel the most connected, the most clear, the most purposeful. And like I'll go to sleep at night thinking to myself, like, I cannot wait to wake up tomorrow. Whereas I used to be like, I can't wait to go to bed.
Yeah, I think actually what's actually fascinating to me in my personal experience is that oftentimes in my life, these moments of clarity, these points of clarity come almost immediately after a very severe point of unclarity. I'm not sure what the opposite of that is.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like
Just like confusion or maybe being like watered down in your, yeah.
It's this weird balance. It's almost, like it's like, I wouldn't even call it, I think people might refer to it as like a low point in your life.
It feels like that.
Yeah.
When you're going through it, it doesn't feel good.
No. But it's almost realizing that, like, recognizing where you are and where you're feeling, or how you're feeling, and like obviously allowing yourself to feel those emotions and feel those feelings, and like that's vulnerable. That is the definition of being vulnerable, is with yourself, is going into those feelings, feeling them, and then pulling yourself out of the and not allowing yourself to really identify with those feelings.
Yeah. So question, when you have reached points like that in your life, how do you pull yourself out? What are the things that you do to bring yourself into clarity when you feel like you're in that low moment? Things feel foggy. You don't have clear vision. What do you do to bring yourself more clarity? Yeah.
So actually there's a book that I read when I was in college, when I was a freshman in college, when I was 18, like my entire life, like I feel like I've been this like old soul almost. And like when I was 18, I read this book that's literally changed my life. It was called The Power of Now.
Oh yeah. Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah. And that's literally what I remind myself. One of the teachings, I guess, principles in it is just to be present with where you are. And one of the rules that I wrote down whenever I was kind of flying home to Pittsburgh was like being present, in that the really, I mean, in a very like actual way, like the past really does not exist. The future is not, here. It does not exist either. Like all you really have is now. Yeah. And I try and remind myself of that when I'm feeling a certain type of way, is that like being present, because I think a lot of the times why I'm feeling a certain type of way is because of something that happened yesterday or a week ago, right? I kind of point to, and this is what works for me. Like this is my unlock, that I try and recognize like why I'm feeling a certain type of way if I'm at a point of confusion or unclarity. And it doesn't really have to be, I think oftentimes it's easy to be like, breakups, fights you might have with your friends or family members or something, because those hurt because they're people that are close to you and you love. But I don't think it really has to be that. It might be just a low point might just be, I don't know what next step to take. I don't know what direction to go in now. That could easily be another low point.
Yeah, because feeling like purposelessness is such a horrible feeling. If you feel like you don't have purpose, don't have direction.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, reminding myself that being present with where I am right now, and knowing that everything's okay. Like, it's always going to be okay.
Do you have any practices or habits or things that you turn to? Maybe it's like physical activity or things like that can help you to kind of just like ease your mind and get out of your head a little bit? Yeah.
So what I've recently been doing, I never really did cardio really at all. But what really helps for me is actually, like really just doing just going for a run for like, whether it's on a treadmill or outside for like half an hour or something like that. Really just being outside. And I think since moving, it's easy to do this. And it's especially just like literally, like you said before, being in the sun, like breathing in the like air outside and like smelling certain smells and stuff outside, like doing very human things is what kind of reminds me, to be more present, be more aware with with how everything kind of is going.
I actually love how you said that, like doing more human things, because I think with the development of technology and where we're headed, we are getting so disconnected from reality and so disconnected from the human experience. So I love how you phrase that. I think it's important to humanize ourselves and to live our human experience, which is part of, being present and using all of your senses, right? Seeing and touching and breathing and feeling and all of these things, right? So I agree wholeheartedly. And when I lived in LA, that was my favorite part, was being out. And I would go, because I lived on Venice Beach and also Marina, and I would watch a sunset every single night. I actually had a little thing on my Instagram called Sunsets with Emily. Oh yeah. No matter what I was doing, I would look up like, what time does the sunset?
Oh, I might start doing that.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you have to, because like you have the most beautiful sunsets there. Even if you're at the rooftop or of an apartment or the rooftop of a garage, or if you can get to the beach or a trail, whatever it is, just go like 10 minutes before sunset. But then the key is you got to stay after the sunset, because most people, there's like a crowd of people, they watch the sunset and then they leave. And I'd always like laugh. I'm like, man, they're missing the most beautiful part. And it's actually after the sunsets, you get all of these like pinks that come out, right? And these different colors. And it's like, even it gets more beautiful, like as it keeps going down.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely check out the sunsets. Sunsets are so healing for me.
I agree. Whenever I went on my vacation with my family, that's something that I did. I remember like going to see the sunrise, because that's what we were on the East Coast. So that's what it did.
Yeah. So that's what it did. Nice.
So I remember doing that. And I mean, even that's I'm a very like early riser, morning person. Like I'm very productive in the morning, and I love just going to the beach at like 6 a.m. and watching the sunrise. And now I'm definitely gonna have to check that out though. Like when I go home.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. Yeah. And we don't have the best views here in Houston to watch sunsets, but I have found a few parking garages that I try to hit occasionally. Yeah. But that's definitely one of those things for me that, I think sometimes people are looking for the answer to their problems. They're looking for the answer to their confusion or their lack of clarity. And sometimes I think you just need to go out and experience life in all these different ways.
You may have mentioned it, but like, what do you do?
I do in order to gain clarity.
Yeah.
Number one, I identify all the things that may be blocking my vision. So maybe it's I'm consuming too much social media. Maybe it's I'm living on my phone, right? And I immediately start creating boundaries around these things. So I really identify like, what do I feel could be clouding me right now? And I try to really just disconnect from all of that. And then I try to live experiences that bring clarity. So rather than most of the time when I'm in that space, I can't like think my way out of it. I actually have to go experience things. So this may sound different, but one thing I've really gotten into is cold therapy and cold and hot therapy recently. And so I'll go and do like a cold plunge. And that is number one, amazing physically. But my favorite benefits are the mental clarity and shifts that happen from number one, being in a position where you feel like you can't, like you get in there and your body goes into this like freak out mode, like inside your body is screaming, like get out of the water. You are not safe, like freaking out. And most people want to get out. Right. And so by overcoming that and settling into it, you learn to surrender to the cold. I remember the first time I remember the first time I tried to get in there and I was like, Sahara Desert, it's so hot. And so what's funny about that, I always look at the deeper meaning, is I am denying my reality and I'm resisting what I'm experiencing. And so that makes you think like, when do I do that in my life? When do I go through a hard season where I'm denying my reality, where I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm okay. But like, really, I'm not okay. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you would just feel what you're feeling, you could like settle into that feeling. Right. And for me, it's like settling into that cold. And then all of a sudden my muscles release and I'm just still and I'm present, So that's like one little way that I do that.
I actually started taking cold showers.
Yeah.
It's a very similar experience. I'll like take like a normal like hot shower or whatever, but then the last 5 minutes I'll actually do this. I'll actually just turn it all the way to cold. And like you said, like think going into it, when I first started doing it, I'm like, this is going to be the worst thing. Like, I mean, it's not fun. Like but it's for the mental, it provides this mental clarity, right? That's, you don't really realize is actually, it's very powerful. Like you said.
Have you ever done breath work?
No, like what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, so I was the same way. Probably not. Breath work. So it's essentially like intentional rhythmic breathing. And there's different methods and different ways that you can do it. but I did my first real like one-on-one breathwork session a couple of weeks ago. And so it was a whole hour, which sounds so long to sit there and breathe. But you're basically laying there with like an eye fold on, and the instructor, the breathwork facilitator, guides you through it. And his name is Justin Lovato. I love him. I support him fully. He has like an online program you guys can get, so check him out. But they guide you through breathing. So you're breathing a certain way. They're telling you like, you know, how long to be in, how long to breathe out, if you're holding it. Basically, the breathing and the breath is to move the energy within your body. You get all of that energy out, and then at the end of that session, you feel, it's crazy, your body will like start to tingle a little bit because you've removed and like pushed through all of that energy.
Yeah.
And so then at the end of it, we went into this like little meditation, and I reached this level of presence and stillness that I have never reached before. And I thought I had been present and thought I had been still before. And this was like, I mean, it brought me to tears because I was like, this is beautiful. And this is within every single person.
I know.
We just never stop enough to experience it. It's
crazy because, right, so that bodily function, if you want to call it that, with breathing is what is, I'm not sure what the term is, like the science term to describe it, but it's something that it happens naturally, right? But you can also control it, right? And by controlling it, it's crazy that links and that can connect to changing your state.
Yeah.
Right? And it's something that's so like you have access to, right? And it's very simple.
It's free.
Yeah,
we
right?
all have it.
Right, you don't need a teacher. I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
wait, kind of maybe, but I don't know.
No, you also don't. You can totally do it on your own. And breathwork doesn't have to be this overly complicated thing. You know, you can literally just do like 10 deep breaths in and out by yourself. That's also breathwork.
Yeah, actually, I have a quick question. Do you have any trouble sleeping at night?
No, I sleep like a baby.
Yeah. So like, well, actually one thing my friend actually mentioned to me whenever I was coming here was like, she dropped me off at the airport, was we were talking about falling asleep for some reason. And then I was telling her like, yeah, like been having some trouble like falling asleep lately. And she told me the same thing. And she said, well, what she told me, what you said, she's like, oh, I sleep like a baby. It's like nothing. I'm like, what do you like? Do you have like a nightly routine or anything? Like what helps you? And she actually mentioned that she does a lot of like, she just focuses like on her breath and breathing. And then she's like, whatever's going on in my mind, if there's any problems or things like unsureties about what's going to happen tomorrow or, you know, in a few days, that realizing like, okay, I can't do anything about those right now. Those will come like when they come. Right now, my intention is falling asleep. And what helps, she told me that, you know, helps her is like focusing on her breath and just kind of, and you kind of just puts her to sleep like that. So it's like interesting.
Yeah, I recently started utilizing some breath work before meditation.
Yeah.
And then after that, then I'll go into like prayer and connecting to God. Though for me, I'm kind of doing it the whole time because that's just how I do it. But for me, the breath work moves the energy. It gets me out of my head, and then I'm able to meditate. I can meditate so much better than if I just go straight into meditation, right? Because we're in this like overly wired society where we have so much coming into our mind at all times, thoughts, ideas, beliefs, photos, feelings, emotions, right? And so to get rid of all of that and kind of create some space, I've been utilizing breath work. And then I have a great meditation session, which there's some YouTube channels. If you don't know of them, I'll show you some. That I really love, even if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And then I won't even make it through a 10-minute one and I'm asleep.
Oh, so you do all this at night?
I do it throughout any point in the day. So like I've gotten really good at, I always have a morning routine and a nightly routine, which what they consist of changes on a daily basis. Because I used to be really structured in, okay, this is my exact morning routine, step 1 through 5.
Yeah.
And that was great. But now it's like I have all these different modalities that I love.
That's awesome.
And it's like, what does Emily need today? And like tuning in and listening to my body and then giving myself what I need, which might be 20 minutes of yoga. It might be 5 minutes of yoga. And then it might be my devotional or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of how I've started to utilize those things.
I love that.
Yeah. I love that you have questions for me.
I have another question.
Yeah. I love that.
Hopefully I can remember. So one thing that just popped into my mind was, we're going back to this whole power of like social media, right? So kind of connecting a few different points that popped into my head when you were speaking. So I guess to start off with, I think a lot of the times with our actions and being intentional throughout the day is we do a lot of unconscious things and that don't really move us in a direction towards where we want to go. And sometimes you know, I think that's why it's so important to prioritize, like you said, for the month, like this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. This is, I'm going to visualize, you know, the person that I want to be this month. Like a lot of times that people just may not take take the time to do that. So they don't know. And so they spend their, you know, whatever free time they may have throughout their days doing unconscious things that don't kind of move them in that direction. So I think that's important to kind of recognize as a foundation. And then, like you said about, I'm trying to think where I was going to go with this, but the power of like social media is like you actually, and this is how like actually really connected with your episodes that you put out like on your page whenever I was actually looking at them for the first time was because for me, you have, I think in my personal experience, I realized this was that you have so much power and control of what you feed your body physically, right? But like your mind and, you know, emotionally and all of this stuff. And I think for me, you know, whenever you're just unconsciously doing scrolling, right? Or stories like you know, it's tapping, you're like subconsciously feeding your brain these images, these, you can't unsee things and you can't unread things. And you can't unwatch things. And I started to like, I think I'm not sure if I read that somewhere or saw that somewhere or just like told myself this, but I started telling myself that I'm like, I can't unread certain things because they're going to make me feel a certain type of way. I can't unsee certain things because they're going to make me feel a certain type of way. So let me actually get ahead of this and take control and take conscious steps towards feeding myself valuable things or content or putting myself in situations. It doesn't just have to be on social media or online. It can be in person, but I think that's where a lot of people are, and you know, obviously spending their time now is online. So for me, I actually started to unfollow a lot of people and pages that weren't kind of moving me in the direction or made me feel a certain type of way that I didn't want to feel, or, you know, I wanted to see content or watch content, interact with content, people that were people that I wanted to be more like. And that's whenever I was actually looking at your page and saw your episodes. I'm and it was kind of funny how these things like align, right? When you're ready for them.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And at this point I was so like open and ready and consciously aware of like, this is the type of person that I now want to become and want to move towards. And I you know, saw some of your episodes and I think kind of connecting the dots as far as the value of social media and reminding people of things that work for you and things that you've tried or you found from other people that have helped you is going back to the whole human connection and in providing that value to other people. Is that, you know, that's, you're reminding people that like, this is what I've tried, this is what works for me. And I think it goes back to maybe some people just don't know where they want to go or what they want to do because they just haven't exposed themselves to the right types of people, or they haven't been in the right life situations or circumstances to promote that type of person.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of just like connects like through that.
Oh, I think that's huge. I think, you know, what I'm hearing you say and kind of express is that you have become more conscious, right? So we talk all the time about living unconsciously. That's how we all kind of are until we start to like wake up, so to speak. And I feel like it's just raising your level of consciousness, and what you recognized was, like you said, already kind of alive in you. You were raising your level of consciousness and you recognized that I was conscious, right? And I'm sharing that consciousness. And I feel like the more that we do that as a society, the more that we can get to a better place in this world. And I think ultimately it raises like the frequency of the world, because the more conscious you become, the more healing you do, the more loving you become, the more, you know, forgiveness you're able to give yourself and also to other people. So I feel like you said, when you're ready for it, life will start showing you people and experiences where you're like, oh, there's another way to live life, you know?
Yeah. And I think, and that just goes back to this connection, this, that like you said when we started this, like opportunity that is out there because of social media, or what we can kind of create now, is that hopefully going into the future that it's even more accessible is, I guess, the word that I was looking for. Because I mean, I guess back in my parents' generation or grandparents' generation, you were whatever, the types of people, the family that you were around, the friends that you were around in school, when you started your job and your career, wherever you kind of placed yourself, it was a lot harder to really maybe change that circumstance. Like you couldn't just be like, oh, typically your mentor is, or someone who kind of would show you the way or show you remind you of certain things that help them, may have just been someone like a teacher or someone, or like a coworker who was like your supervisor or something, like, oh, I want to be like them. But nowadays you can, if you're intentional with your time, you can almost be anyone you want to be, because you can put your headphones in, you can listen, you can read, there's just the opportunity is just endless, really. And it's because of the access that everyone has.
It's so true. I was looking at books the other day on my phone, which I never do, but I had some like downtime, and I was like, I know I don't want to scroll. I'm like, let me check out this book app, right? I prefer books in my hand. Like I always want to like flip the pages, but I did anyways. And I found myself like really getting into some of the sample readings to like see if I wanted the book. And I, for a long time, have kind of wanted a mentor in a certain area of my life. And I ended up finding a book that was pretty much all about that. It was teaching like leadership skills in this area of life. And I was like, this is amazing. The fact that I can literally buy like a $9, $30 book, whatever it is, and get all of these skills and training and teaching and mentorship, and now like it's free content, right? There's podcasts, there's YouTube videos, like it's absolutely endless. But I think, to circle back about what you were mentioning earlier, how people were limited back in the day by just the people they were physically around, and how now it's like we have so much more access to any sort of mentor. And I think it just shows you how your environment is crucial. So if you look at your environment right now and you look at your coworkers, you look at your friends, you look at the circles that you're in, you look at the place you live, maybe the exact apartment that you live in, and you are not inspired, you don't get more creativity, you aren't encouraged to be the fullest expression of yourself, then don't judge any of those environments, but be intentional and choose and say, you know what? There's other things and people and environments out there that would probably cultivate the best version of me, and I got to find that.
Yeah. So how would you, so like, let's say there's an individual or there's a person that maybe isn't around that, right? So would you say it's something that is very like internal, that they just kind of consciously, like you said, like when you're ready for certain things to change and stuff, it'll, certain things will come, right? But do you think there's anything that like people can really, I guess, aside from like, watching or becoming more aware of like their surroundings and then making a change, if that's kind of like what needs to be made? Is there anything that you can kind of maybe helped you personally, if you recognize that there were people around you that maybe, like you said, weren't inspiring you to create more, or
kind of like if you recognize that people around you were limiting you? Yeah,
actually, I think the question that I'm actually trying to ask, is it more something that just kind of comes like from within, to be like, oh, like these aren't, my kind of people, I need to change this? Or is it something that, I'm not even sure what the question is.
Like, I think I kind of get, like, you're asking
what. It's both.
Yeah, I kind of get where you're going with it, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong. But I think it could be one of two things. I think sometimes people, if they get really honest with themselves, they recognize a longing in their heart. Yeah, they have to be honest with themselves to recognize that there's this like longing and desire for something more. And oftentimes they don't know what that is. And so I think by them listening to something like this podcast or reading a book or doing something like that, it raises their awareness more and more, and it teaches them things that they didn't previously know. right? Maybe they didn't have a mentor or a parent figure or somebody ahead of them to kind of show them the way, right? Or to even talk about intentional living. Maybe this is the first podcast anyone's ever heard about intentional living. And now they're like, maybe I shouldn't scroll and just look at feeds of people that make me feel worse about myself or make me feel right. Maybe I should, listen to content and people who encourage me, inspire me, show me that I can, and not like in a fake positive way, but like in a, hey, like this is what worked for me, go take action in your life kind of way. So, and I think the other piece of this is, asking how to make these changes or how to bring awareness to it. I think the best thing is to have people come into your environment. If you're that person that you have that kind of space where you encourage people, you bring out the best in them, and just allow them to experience you and your environment naturally, right? Or if you have a friend that is limited, invite them to go into a community, an environment where people have that. For example, Alpha Land just opened, right? Like we've been training there. That environment is incredible. And so for me, I would just kind of nicely like bring someone along and be like, hey, like come hang out for the weekend, right? Let's go to Alpha Land. Let's do a cold plunge. Let's do sauna. Let's do these things and have these experiences that opens up your eyes without me ever saying a word.
I think that's powerful too, because I think a lot of the times, like you actually mentioned earlier, was that, I think our natural inclination as a human being is to just be average, right? Or just, typical, or not kind of do things that are outside the norm or outside the box. So I think like what you also mentioned about being honest and being vulnerable with how you're feeling is a big part of it. And then also taking those steps to change that environment or change who you are as a person, is actually very interesting. And to kind of see people that anyone who does that it's so admirable. It's so respectable, because it's probably it may not seem like it's a hard, I don't know. In my eyes, it is a very hard thing to do.
Absolutely.
Is to be, because it's being honest with yourself, being vulnerable, and then actually taking intentional actions to change who you are as a person, because that's scary. And there's a lot of judgment from around the people that you probably are surrounding yourself with to then actually escape that.
Totally. And what I have to say to that is, if you died tonight, you are not going to give two shits about what anyone else thinks. So think about that. If I die tonight, if I die at the end of this year, am I going to care about what these random people say on my deathbed? Am I going to be like, Maria from Instagram said this? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, no, you're not going to care at all. You're going to be thinking about your family. You're going to be thinking about, like, did I make my imprint on the world, right? I believe that every person deep inside of them has like these beautiful gifts and treasures to give the world. And how sad would it be to die not ever letting those things out?
It's funny you mention that, because a lot of, this past summer was whenever I was having a lot of these, awakening feelings or whatever inside me. And one of the things that I actually saw it was actually from another contestant on the show, was kind of, he made a post about it, was I've always been a super introverted person, like growing, like that's just who I am. And so the post was something along the lines of, I'm not going to let an insecurity about myself prevent me from helping other people.
Wow.
And I resonated with that so much. And I said to myself, I told myself that was, I'm not going to let, however I'm feeling about myself, I'm going to be honest with myself. I'm going to be vulnerable and say, I'm not going to let maybe how I'm judging myself prevent me from helping other people. And what that tangibly meant for me was putting out content that could help people. And I feel like this type of content helps a lot of people. And this is where I wanted to take the direction on my page. And that's where it honestly kind of stemmed from, was, this is the direction that I want to take. And I want to help people. But right now, what is preventing me from helping people is an insecure feeling of how I may be judged from putting this content out, because it's very different. It's very atypical from whatever I was putting out before. But I think this is the right decision, and this is what I need to do right now.
Yeah, good for you. I'm so proud of you for doing that, because it is a difficult decision to make that. And what's funny is as you're saying this, I'm like, people will judge you either way. They'll judge you if you keep putting the same content out, right? They're like, he's just that shirtless LA model guy from Love Island, right? Like they're just going to label you with all these things. They're going to, you know, say these other things about you being the most authentic, true version of yourself and caring about other people. You know what I mean? They'll say things no matter what. So why not be the fullest expression of you? Why not do it and help people?
I feel like I go back and forth on this all day.
I know. And also we are like, I don't want you to miss your flight. I don't know what time. We should probably get going, to be honest.
No, I can honestly leave till 2:30.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's only half an hour away, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I don't board until like 4:10.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
4:40 is like my flight. But no, it's like funny you say that because like this concept, or this idea that we're kind of going back and forth on right now is super relevant to what I was really reminding myself kind of this past summer, like right when I was moving to LA or before that. What caused me to want to do this was along, you know, besides the fact that like I got a job and stuff, was, you know, to start off with, you know, I wasn't going to let an insecurity about how I felt about myself. Like, you know, they're going to prevent me from helping other people. You know, people are going to judge you either way. So why not just be yourself? And also stemming from that was, let me try and think what I was going to say, was, oh yeah. So, also pretty much like all throughout my life, I think it's just because, this is very like,
so spit it out.
Like what I'm going to say is like very,
it's okay.
The type of person that like you said that I was, but like, whenever we started the show, as far as like when I first came up to you, is like as far as like humility goes and everything. I think it's just that's like the type of that's how like my parents raised me to be. Like that's the environment that I grew up in, was not to be so like bragging or like egotistical or like, you know, look at me or anything like showy or anything like that. So like my entire life, like I've always been super humble, super kind, like super nice, super selfless. And I kind of identified with that. And I also, and don't get me wrong, like those are super admirable qualities and traits and values to have as a person. Like those are always going to be like my morals and everything. But I almost was, I identified with this person that was like this, was super selfless, was always going to be selfless, was always going to put other people before myself. And it was almost to my downfall because I was doing that. And I could not say no to people. Because I felt like I was being selfish by not doing whatever it is that they wanted to do. Like with my friends or anything like that. So along, you know, kind of around that time period, this past summer, I you know, kind of moving was, in my eyes, like a very selfish kind of thing. I was like, I'm doing this for me. And there were these, I'm trying to think, there were these certain like cues that I kept like telling myself as far as, like, I do think that like being selfish is actually the selfless thing, because it's actually being authentically you. And to a point, but like, I think if you are like generally just a selfless person, that it kind of rubs people like a weird way, that like when you first start to do things that are objectively maybe selfish, or like something that like I kept telling myself like, you have to romanticize your life. You have to romanticize your goals and dreams. Like you have to like live with main character energy or whatever that is. And that these things I kept telling myself were like, I'm like, oh, these successes, these dreams, these goals are for other people. Like they're not for me, because for whatever reason. And then I was like, why am I telling myself this? Like, why am I living like this? And
like, why are you playing small?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, you know, screw all of this. I'm going to take, it's not that I was like being like any kind of like, I think this was just, these were things that I wanted to do in my life. And like you said, like, if you die tonight or die tomorrow, and I didn't actually go after what I wanted to, then it'd be the biggest regret of my life.
Yeah, no kidding. And I think what you're sharing, a lot of people have experience with, right? They start living their life for other people. They get into this people pleasing type of mentality. And so I think a step of growth is learning to honor yourself, learning to respect yourself, and learning that when you are being the fullest expression of you, which takes some selfish things, it takes prioritizing yourself, right? When you're being that fullest version of you, you're actually showing up for those other people so much better, right? Think about like, you know, moms and dads and they have kids, right? They feel selfish taking time to do things just for themselves and not for their kids. But it's like, you'll show up as a better parent. You're going to be more loving, more patient, more kind if you do the things that are good for you, you know? So I think in, you know, our conversation here, it's like you started to learn that number one, you are worthy of success and you are worthy of all these things that you believe in for other people, right? And I think what you were mentioning is there can be this transition period when you go from people pleasing to honoring yourself, respecting yourself, and setting boundaries. It can definitely rub people the wrong way. There's always that transition season when you start to set those boundaries. But I think if you'll get through the mud, so to speak, at the other end of that, people end up respecting you more and they actually gain inspiration from it to do it for themselves too. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I actually have. Yeah, I would say, I think that's what it's what that transition is like evolves into, right? Is more inspiration, right? But I was actually going to ask you, Emily, like, did you have like a transition period for you that you could like look back and point to and we're like, I don't know if we're just like, if this is an inherent quality in like in human beings, if we are just like typically, or maybe if this is just like a household thing, you're raised to be a certain type of person. But like, were you ever like operated your life as like a like people pleasing, and then there was a transition period to be like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to go after. Like, did you have that for yourself?
I definitely fell into people pleasing for sure. I never wanted to make anyone feel bad. So my kind of people pleasing was more so like, putting other people's feelings before mine. So if I thought that I might make them feel bad or their feelings might be hurt or something like that, I would always prioritize their feelings over mine. And so one, I had to become aware to it, right? And then two, I had to just start practicing in really small ways, like really being who I am and really communicating and using my voice. Even if it was something as simple as, let's say, where to eat for dinner, right? And I really wanted to go somewhere, but I didn't want to say it because I didn't want to like upset anyone, right? So, and so it seems really small and insignificant, but if you're lacking the ability to really speak up for yourself, to honor yourself, to set your own boundaries, you have to look for the small moments in life where you can start to practice these things. So even though like where we want to go for dinner seems really small, maybe that's a big step for you to be like, I want sushi, right? And maybe like the other person's like, well, I want Mexican, and you guys decide to go to Mexican. That's fine. But at least you had the practice of saying what you actually wanted, you know? And I think that's really difficult for some people. So for me, it wasn't like one turning event. It was just becoming aware and starting to practice it in small ways to where I remember there's, you know, one time I was practicing it, so to speak, and my friends were like, hey, like, let's go watch this movie later. And we were all hanging out, like we were all together. And they were like, yeah, we're going to go watch this movie. Emily, you want to come? And I was like, nope. And she was like, almost shocked. She was like, sorry, what? And I was like, no. She was like, why? And I was like, I don't want to. And she was like, that's really cool. And she was, you know, she respected it. And I honestly just didn't want to see the movie, you know, and everyone else wanted to go. And I don't really have FOMO. I'm like, I am the party, yo. No, I'm kidding. No, but like, you know, I just didn't want to. So I said no, you know, and they had a great time. They enjoyed the movie and I didn't miss anything, you know.
It's funny, like you said about, because I used to be super indecisive, and that's like a quality that I am, like I mentioned before, as far as like simplifying my options into like very few options, being very decisive, because you'll never know the alternative of whatever other decision you chose to make, regardless of whether that's a super insignificant decision or a very big life-changing decision. But it's funny, like last night, we went out to dinner, and like we were ordering appetizers like for the table, and the waitress like came up to me because I was at the end of the table. I'm like, like we had like 10 people or something. And she's like asking me like what we wanted. And I was like, I don't know. But like, I was just, but I that was like practicing it, right? I'm like, all right, I'm just going to get like, I'm going to get sushi, and then we're going to get some other things. Like I was like, like, I'm sure like anyone else who did this is probably just guessing. And so I was like, I'm going to do that same thing. So,
Yeah, exactly. Just take charge and figure it out later.
Yeah.
And I always kind of ask myself, what's the worst case scenario, right? Worst case scenario, people are like, oh, I don't like eating this, you know? And the chances are most people are going to like most of what you get if you get a variety of things.
Right, yeah.
But let's think about even a big decision of moving across the country. What is the worst case scenario that could happen? And for me, when I made that move, because I moved to LA for 7 years, my worst case scenario was I know I can survive for a whole year. And if I go out there and fall on my face, I will move back after a year and I'll just start over. I'll work 3 jobs if I have to get back on my feet. You know, I wasn't scared of failing because at least I would know. Whereas if you don't make that decision, you'll never know, you know? So I think it's important to kind of play it out. And honestly, at the end of the day, just take the leap of faith because you never know.
Yeah. I tell myself a lot, and it kind of goes back to being decisive and everything. And also what you just mentioned. I think about that all the time though, honestly. And I think in my personal experience, I've realized that the worst thing that can happen is really not that bad.
Right.
It's never really that bad.
And when does the worst case scenario actually happen?
Exactly right. Never.
It's just in our heads.
Yeah. I have a couple of things to say after that too. But yeah, so I'm very similar way, like, you know, moving to LA, I'm like, you know, I'm going to figure this out. And the worst thing that can happen is it's not that bad. I also tell myself that every decision, very few things in life are permanent. And
that's
most things are temporary.
That
right?
is the truth.
I had made a post a little while ago, but I think it was like it was around this concept is that most things in life are temporary, and if they are not, our feelings about them are. And
wow.
Over time, whatever happens that you think you might, right, a feeling, right, that you think may be permanent, you know, time heals all wounds. Like over time, you realize, oh wow, like I'm not gonna have this feeling forever. Or a decision I make moving somewhere across the country, everything is temporary. And like you said, I think it does go back to really realizing what is important to you in your life. And for me, it's very few things, but it's very significant things. And for me, it's my family are healthy and doing well, and my friends are healthy and doing well, and I'm here and I'm okay, right? And that's what matters to me. And aside from anything else happening, nothing is really that big of a deal.
That's such good perspective and such a good mindset to have at, you know, being younger. I feel like if more people in their early 20s could have this kind of mentality, it would help so much because you're already able to see the valuable parts of life, you know. And I think a lot of people have to go through, you know, periods of time where you think all these other things matter. You think a number on an Instagram account really matters, when in reality, like, it really doesn't, you know. And when you think that like personal accomplishments really matter, or, you know, money or cars or whatever, and those things are cool and they have their place and maybe they're a source of motivation, and that's great, right? But it's like on your deathbed, you're literally only going to care about what you just mentioned.
Yeah. And it's just like living your life by that. And then I think it's a lot of the times people try and direct. Another thing that I've also just, obviously I used to want to control my life and have it. I wanted to have my, like, you know, hands on, you know, I wanted my life to go in a certain direction and, you know, be a certain type of person at a certain type of age. But like you said, like, time is so made up, like, and like these thresholds, right, of whatever ages like you get to, right? Like 40 years old, I want to have this. I want to, like, what does that actually mean? Like, that doesn't, you know, and then you get there, and then you kind of look around, and then it's just like, it's always something like in the future. And then you always kind of, you're persistently not living like where you are, like right now.
Yes.
And it's always like, I'm going to chase after money. I'm going to chase after success, whatever that means to you. I'm going to chase after a relationship. And I think it kind of goes back to, in my experience, whenever I've actually tried to control certain things or chase after certain things, they almost kind of all get further away from me, like almost like equidistant away, like as I'm chasing them.
Well, I think it's funny that we have this concept that we can control life, because I think if there's anything that 2020 showed us, it's that we do not control life, right? Like if everyone used to always say like, okay, what's the 5-year plan? And I always hated that question because I'm like, I could never in a million years plan out the next 5 years of my life. Like, of course, I can be intentional. I can have goals. I can have ideas of where I want to go. But, you know, like, for example, last year I got this incredible job position that provided a lot for me, and I did not apply for it. It was like a literal God thing for me, and I would have never planned for that, right? And so things like that can really change the trajectory of your life. And so I really live life with like this open mentality of like, I'm doing everything that I know to do. I am stewarding what I have really well, and I have goals. But I'm just totally aware that there's probably something in the future, in the near future even, that I can't see right now. I could never plan for, and I don't want to close myself off to it. People sometimes close themselves off to the most beautiful parts of life because they are living within the own box that they've created, right? They're like, I have my ecosystem, it's right here, and this is what it consists of, and this is perfect. And they don't realize that they have literally created this boundary around themselves where great things in their life can't penetrate, you know, and get through and open themselves up to these new things and experiences and people. So I love what you're mentioning here, how, you know, it's just important to be present because the goal line, it always moves, you know? So what are a few ways that you practice like getting present in your life when you find that you are spending too much time in anxiety or like thinking about the future or whatever it is? Like, what do you do in that moment when you're like, it's a Wednesday, I'm anxious, I'm thinking about the future? What's your go-to?
Yeah. So I guess for me, so if I'm feeling like anxious about certain big things that are coming up in the future that are out of my control because they're going to happen, or just like, or the unknown, right? I guess in general, like, I think that's actually kind of, it's a thought that I've had since moving, that's kind of like been in the back of my head. That's kind of like always there. It's about kind of like, you know, I'm like doing all of this on my own now. Like I'm on my own. And I guess it's this, I mean, like if I were to like picture it, it's like this small thought of like, oh, like what happens if like I fail, or, you know, I can't, you know, continue doing like my online coaching or anything like that. But some things that I do is I do a lot of, I meditate, like you said as well. Like I used to actually do that. I used to do it. Like I used to work out. I mean, I do like to work out like early in the mornings, and I would actually wake up first thing in the morning and I would meditate for like 10 minutes. I usually just throw on like a YouTube guided meditation.
Me too.
So I've started doing that a lot more. If that's something that like I am anxious about. But I used to have like, I guess, anxiety or like be anxious. Even just like saying that word like makes me feel a certain way.
Isn't that crazy?
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy, but also that shows you like the power of your words.
Yeah.
So think about the power of your spoken word and then the power of other people's words. That makes you hopefully have more intention with what you allow to come out of your mouth and what you allow yourself to intake from other people, right? Because words really do, like, they bring life or death to the situation. You can either be uplifted, encouraged, you know, given more peace, more joy, or it can be the literal opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts are the same way, but words are more powerful. Yeah, I agree. And I also think like when you're talking to someone and you're telling someone that you're going to do something, for me at least, like my word is like my Bible, right? Like if I were to not do, and like I've grown so much like over the past year and a half as far as like that goes. But yeah, like you said, I think like having thoughts and even just like writing things down like helps me a lot too, as far as like I don't I, I don't journal as much anymore, but that did help me a lot whenever I would like maybe be feeling a certain type of way. That's something that I did actually prior to kind of doing the show a couple summers ago. You have to quarantine before the show because it was like in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
And I actually journaled like every single day.
Wow.
And I still have like the notebook and stuff, but that helped me a lot because like I was like, oh, like there's like big unknown, like this is a big change in my life right now. But that's something that I do to kind of bring clarity back into my life, like meditating, journaling.
I found that to be really helpful too. Those are definitely some of my go-tos. The good thing I like about journaling is you can literally just get all the thoughts that are circulating, which are just on repeat. It's like a cycle, right? And put them out on paper, and then you're able to see them with perspective. And sometimes that even just brings clarity just doing that.
Yeah, and they're like not as scary.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, we're nearing the end of the podcast. So you have a fitness coaching business, right? Who do you enjoy helping? Like, who are your clients that you really enjoy working with, and who would be good to apply to work with you?
Yeah, I would say I have two ideal clients. So the first one would be just because in my personal experience, and I can just really just go off of things that have worked for me, and that's obviously what I kind of as I'm taking on new clients, like as I'm growing my business, I'm realizing what works, what doesn't work for different types of people. But I know what works for me. So like ideally an ideal client would be someone that is like around my age in their 20s or something like that, who is familiar with kind of like working out and has followed a certain kind of program before, but they're looking to I think I can provide a lot more value on like the nutrition side, as far as like, oh, I want to gain muscle, I want to kind of lose fat. In my experience, I think from just doing the one show, like I was able to kind of find things that work for me, and like I didn't do any cardio during that at all, and like I was happy with how everything went.
That's awesome.
And so like an ideal client for me would be like someone who is very similar to kind of like me and like in their 20s, or like a guy who's kind of familiar with working out, has like kind of a split, but it's kind of confused on the nutrition side. And that's kind of like, I think what I can help with.
Yeah, I feel like that's cool because it's, you're able to use your personal experience to help like that guy that maybe is in college that is looking for some direction, guidance, someone to mentor them as they take on their fitness journey, which is so important, especially if you're at the beginning of your journey. You have the opportunity to make beginner gains. They're a real thing. They're scientifically proven. So get somebody to help you and show you the way, because then you can make the most amount of progress in those really crucial years where you're building that foundation. So Connor, it's been amazing having you on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being a guest and sharing your wealth of knowledge with everyone. I will link all your stuff below. So listeners, if you guys want to connect with him, make sure that you are following him on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, all the things. You can find all the links to those things in the show notes below. So make sure to do us a favor. If you enjoyed this episode, tag us both on your Instagram stories. You can reshare any of the reels that we post on the podcast page, which is Evolve with Emily podcast. And do you want to sign us out?
Yeah. I've never signed out before on the podcast, but thank you guys so much for listening. If you listened in or watched us, and I hope you can find some value from what our conversation today.
Thanks, guys, and we will see you in the next episode of Evolve with Emily. Bye, guys.
Bye.